Hey people, this is your teacher Wright-Thompson, coming to you once more with another interesting lesson. Now, today's lesson will be focusing on the 20th century art movements. And when we speak of the art movements, we are talking about the period in which artists use similar styles and methods in the creation of their artwork. Now, we heard about all these big time artists like Pablo Picasso, George Braque, Salvador Dali, and all of them, but we have not yet placed them in the movement or in the timing that they are supposed to be, because we know that those persons that I just listed, they are pioneers. They are persons who started some of these art movements with creating their own art styles that nowadays people are actually following, right? So we're gonna go through them, each art movement specifically, using the time. Now, when we speak of the 20th century, we are talking about the period between the 1st of January 1901 to the 31st of December 2000. The first art movement recorded for the 20th century is Fauvism. Then you have Cubism. After Cubism, we have Dadaism. Then here comes Surrealism. After Surrealism, we have Abstract Expressionism. Then we have Pop Art. And for today, we're going to stop right at Pop Art. Fauvism started 1903 to 1907 by a man called Henri Matisse. I'm going to allow you now to watch this video and learn more about this Fauvism movement.
And here we see a masterpiece in that style called Cat with a Red Fish by Henri Matisse. When you look at it and try and discover what school of art it might be from, you might be fooled into thinking it's Impressionism. We see that bold brushwork throughout the painting, and it certainly could have been painted from observation. Some of these paintings might even have that hidden Z pattern within them. But when you look carefully, you'll notice there's one thing strikingly different, and that's the color. The Fauvists would use these wild colors and combinations like contrasting colors. So you might see some yellow and purple, some red and green, or orange and blue, like in this landscape by Andre Derain. We can see these contrasting colors popping up. Well, did you know the word Fauvism means wild beasts? And that's what the critics thought about their work. It was wild. Some people liked it, some people downright hated it. But it was an important style that got artists to think about color in a technical sense, to put contrasting colors together for an emotional effect.
I hope you enjoyed that short clipping. Now we're moving on to Cubism. Now Cubism started in 1907 and it went on to 1914. And this movement started by Pablo Picasso and George Braque.
Cubism is a style of art that started in 1907 with this particular painting called Les Demoiselles d'Avignon by Picasso. It's the ladies of Avignon. When Picasso first painted this and showed it to people, they thought it was a big joke. They didn't understand, how could this be a person? Why would you chop them up into geometric pieces? Aren't people supposed to be beautiful? Well, in previous schools of art, they certainly were, and sometimes made to look even better than they were. But here, they definitely look more ugly. Well, Picasso was trying to show something else with art, that art didn't have to be reproducing something that we saw, but it could maybe show the feelings that we had about the subject or give off the feelings to the viewer. We see another example of Cubism here with Marcel Duchamp's Nude Descending a Staircase. It's hard to see a person walking downstairs there, but if you look very carefully, you can see evidence of a head, arms sort of moving along, and legs moving, and there's a staircase towards the top and the bottom. When Marcel was trying to explain this image and how he came up with it, he used a photograph to show it off, a stroke photograph where there's one image on top of the other. Marcel can be seen here in this next photo, walking down the stairs, and you get the idea of how maybe he came up with this nude descending a staircase painting. The Cubists would often show more than one point of view at the same time, shatter the image, but the important thing is there was always a subject. In this one by Umberto Bocchini, it's called The Development of a Bottle in Space. So Cubism could even be used in 3 dimensions. This one, you could see that the bottle is broken up into different shapes and forms, and as you walk around the sculpture, it's as though the bottle appears and disappears, becomes itself, and then breaks apart.
Now here comes Dadaism. It started in 1916 to 1922, and it was started by Marcel Duchamp. Watch this video.
Dada is a style of art from the 1920s and was born out of the chaos of World War I. Because the world didn't make sense, the artists decided they were going to make art that didn't make any sense. Often the artists of the Dada movement would create art that was almost anti-art or insulted the art world, as Marcel Duchamp did here in this piece called LHOOQ. He took a poster or postcard of the Mona Lisa and drew a goatee on it. That's it. That's all of his art. And he was making a statement about the art world at the time. It was kind of insulting, and people said, that's not really art. But Marcel said it was. And today we kind of recognize that as being true. His work is in museums all over the world. We have another example here by Raoul Haussmann, and it's called The Art Critic. It's a collage or a collection of paper pieces and parts from magazines collected together and pasted down to make this image. His statement about the art critics of the time and maybe how he felt about them. Doesn't look like he had very much respect for them at all. The artists of the Dada period were critical of the art media and what people considered art and what they believed was not art. Their art was more about what was going on in your head. The thought process was more important than the product. Sometimes there was no art at all. It would be like a performance, as we see Hugo Ball here in this outlandish kind of costume. And then we have some Dada poetry off to the side here that was from that performance. It literally doesn't make sense. Sometimes they would arbitrarily pick words out of a bag, put them together, and then that was the poetry. It was
Surrealism. It started in 1924 to 1930, and it was started by Salvador Dali.
Surrealism is a style of art from the 1920s, and the word surrealism means super real or more than real. We can see that that's true in this painting by Salvador Dali called The Persistence of Memory. It's painted in a very realistic sort of way, but there's some unusual things going on within the painting. A deflated face in the bottom center, and these melting clocks on the tree and on the foreground elements. The Surrealists were trying to portray dreams and to get to the underlying psychology of the viewer. They would study the works of Sigmund Freud and other psychologists to understand what kind of symbols they should incorporate into their works of art so that maybe we would get to the subconscious of the viewer. René Magritte is another very famous Surrealist artist, and this painting is called The Son of Man. We have an apple floating in front of the man's face, and it gives a haunting, maybe somewhat playful sort of quality to the work of art. You can see that everything is painted very realistically, but we've got this impossible thing sort of happening within the image, so we know it to be a surrealist work of art. Now, many artists even today are using this style for their own works, using photography or painting or sculpture. Here, Sandy Skoglund is doing this image called The Revenge of the Goldfish. She would create a room environment, paint it all blue, and then create these fish to kind of swarm around within the room and then take a photograph with a couple people in it. So she would create a whole environment, and then her photograph would be her work of art. You can see that it's delightful and playful, but there is some kind of haunting quality to it in the magical way that she pulls the environment together.
Abstract Expressionism, 1945 to 1960. Jackson Pollock was the pioneer for that one.
So here we see an example by Jackson Pollock, and it's a splash painting or a drip painting. He would literally just fly the paint right onto his canvas or drip it onto the floor. He wasn't interested in trying to depict something because everybody else was doing that. He wanted to just enjoy the joy of painting, and that would be through grabbing a stick, putting it in a can of paint, and just dripping it over the canvas. Sometimes his canvases were so large he wowould build a bridge over top of it and cast his paint from the bridge. Here we can see him working on his painting. You can see him there, bent over, splashing paint onto the canvas, recording his body movements. Again, there's no subject, and he's trying to express what he feels through his use of color and paint and lines. This painting by Mark Rothko is called White, Red on Yellow, number 13. We don't see a subject. You might think perhaps that's a window, but it's not. He's just putting colors together, and he feels that one color next to another will exude some kind of emotional value.
And now, the final one that I'll be giving you today is pop art. And that one was done in the 1960s, created by no other than Andy Warhol.
Pop art is a school of art from the 1950s and became very popular in the 1960s. One of the masterpieces of pop art was this, the soup can by Andy Warhol. Andy would make this with a team of artists at his studio in New York called The Factory. Many artists would help him out in creating silkscreen images of soup cans and other everyday objects. And that's how pop art got its name. Images from popular culture. Everyday things you wouldn't normally think of as art remade into greater images that we do consider art nowadays. It's almost like Dada revisited, and sometimes it's called Neo-Dada. If a Dada artist was going to do this, he would just get a soup can and put it on a pedestal. But Andy Warhol and his team made them into works of art. This piece, called Wham by Roy Lichtenstein, is two huge canvases with a cartoon image pulled from a comic book. Again, we could see the hallmarks of pop art, and that is bold, vibrant colors. We see bold outlines around the images. We know that this image comes from popular culture media, just like a comic book or a comic strip from the Sunday paper. They were looking to connect with everyday people. They weren't trying to create art for the high and mighty museum collectors. This piece by Jeff Koons is a balloon, animal, dog, rabbit, and they're fun and delightful. They have those bold and vibrant colors that we come to love in pop art. And it's an everyday object made into a larger work of art that we can enjoy in public spaces. Some of these can be found in parks around the world.
Okay guys, now we have come to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed everything about this one. I hope you got a lot of information to help you in your studies. No is the important part. I want you guys to subscribe, and click that notification bell. Share it with your friends who you know are studying visual art, and just have yourself a wonderful day. Love you. Peace out.